Hey, Ryan, it's James West. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, James.
Absolutely. So, for all of our listeners, this is the Invest James West episode 40. We were linked up to Ryan and his company Corva by longtime oilfield veteran Dharmesh Mehta, and then later by Curtis Huff, Freebird Partners, who mentioned Corva during a one-on-one interview that we had with him to discuss oilfield technology adoption. For those of you who don't know Corva, it's a Houston-based software startup focused on helping oil and gas companies optimize drilling programs and completion programs through real-time data analytics and insights. The company built its first-of-a-kind technology platform for delivering a suite of nearly 50 mobile and web apps to monitor drilling and completions, identify hazardous conditions, and give users recommendations based on current and historical subsurface data. And as a result, Corva increases drilling performance and speed while reducing costly rig downtime. Corva software products support oil and gas drilling operations across North America with hundreds of users, including drilling engineers, superintendents, rig crews, and management. Ryan is the founder and CEO of Corva since the inception back in 2014, and prior to that, he spent 7 years at a software innovation company, 1323, where he was also the co-founder. So, Ryan, again, welcome, and maybe if you could frame up the company at a high level, what do you guys do, and what are the key product verticals?
Sure. So, Corva is the company building better wells of the future through data insight. We collect it, we process it, and give it to the field and office in real time. When you think about making decisions for drilling and completions, Corva is the company that allows you to compare all of the data and gain quick insight to accelerate learning curves and ultimately cut well time. We are really good at the analysis in true real time and providing an amazing intuitive software interface.
Interesting. And what were the company's origins? I believe when we talked, 2018, you kind of got your first clients, but then there's been rapid adoption since then across the industry, and I think you tripled the amount of rigs you were working on in 2019. Could you talk about kind of the what you saw, why you started, and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, I think we're still seeing the same things when we started, which is the industry has yet to modernize at the pace that we would hope. But if you look at the last 2 years, Corva really grew faster than any technology in oil and gas measured by adoption. We've been literally holding a dragon's tail. So we couldn't hire people fast enough in that time, and it's really been a fun ride. We still see, where the beginnings that we came from, we still sort of see that as our mission, but it's definitely evolved a bit.
And you had a recent article that you sent me, and we had talked about the title of which was "The Oilfield Innovation Model is Broken." For our listeners, could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, James, I fundamentally think that we have a problem in the industry, and the article is really a call to arms and saying that we all kind of need to work together to get out of it. But we do need to understand that there is a problem, and the status quo isn't really going to work much longer. So I kind of break it down into my thoughts of three points, which are the industry really relies on what I call an engineering mindset. And so most oilfield service companies, most E&Ps are filled with engineers of various backgrounds, a lot of them being mechanical. And the idea is they've built amazing offshore platforms in the ocean. They've built really amazing ways to extract oil. But where the frontier of the world is now shifting is you need to process terabytes in real time. And so the idea is the engineering mindset is that mechanical engineers can quite readily and easily make the leap to software engineers. And I argue that that's actually not the case. I think that software is really hard. I've spent my life doing it, and by all means, I'm learning things every day. And so when you talk about the company has these really hard problems, and they're going to take from the existing engineers they have on the bench to solve that, that's why I think you're seeing the lack of innovation. What I really propose is that in regard to that you really have to leverage the strengths of each company. So the oilfield service companies, they've been around for, in some cases, 100 years, maybe more or less. And then what you have are pretty risky startups. And I think that each company has a DNA that they really excel at. And so we need to kind of pair both of those together to get these innovations. I kind of go on to outline that data sharing is a real mess. We look at data, we want to say the value is gold, yet most of our customers aren't even really looking at 3-year-old data. So if you think about that data 3 years ago was gold. We didn't want to share it, but now we're saying it's garbage, it's trash. And so that's broken. I mean, we need to build trust. We need, as an industry, to say, if we work together, we're going to be in this together. And I think it's a rising tide lifts all boats. It's fine to have, competitive, spirit there, but I really think it needs to work together. And then my third major point is, I think that the oilfield service companies are really held hostage. Every downturn, they're essentially, thrown in the trash is the way I put it. And the idea being that they've invested in all these people to do innovation, and they're the first people that are cut every downturn. And so if you look at that cycle, that really doesn't bode well for delivering lower cost wells, which the E&P and the operators want. And so we got to really think hard to get out of that. But I don't think that this model is going to lead to innovation over time.
Right. So what is the vision, or what do you envision the future of the oil field to be, perhaps a year from now, 2 to 3 years from now, maybe 5 years from now? And I think we embrace this. I'm probably sure you embrace that we're going digital.
Yeah, that's an easy one for me. I think it's a connected data ecosystem, empowering very real-time decisions. If you drill a well 2 miles away and have that instantly feeding into the well you're about to drill, including where to drill, how to drill it, what formation, what's the equipment, I think fundamentally the reservoir model of the future probably looks quite different than what we have now.
Sure, no doubt about that. Well, what was the market opportunity that you saw a few years ago? Why wasn't it so obvious to others, or perhaps it was? But I know that you filled a void that existed in drilling and completion operations for years, and no doubt the sector has lagged in bringing data and real-time analysis together to reach its full potential. So, kind of, why did the market, or was the market just completely missing this?
Yeah. So one example I like to use is, if you look 6 years ago, every person was using their mobile phone to handle all their tasks, whether it's banking, social media, photos. And if you looked at the oil and gas industry, I didn't see any companies really investing in mobile apps. And I know companies have mobile apps, but I'm talking about where they're really great. I didn't see that. And so if you just look at that small slice, you could say mobile apps were going to be a huge part of drilling and completions and production. If you fast forward to today, we still have pretty crappy apps. And so, like, even if you just take that small little perspective and say, hey, if we just built better apps, we know that's going to be the future. Now, if you extrapolate that, I think at Corva, we kind of did that for many things. We knew real-time decision making. We knew you were going to want to take data and compare it to each other to build insight. If you look at kind of like what everyone's doing in terms of what they're doing on the field, what drilling and completion engineers are doing, it's a really humanistic approach, which is monkey see, monkey do, meaning I see someone do it better, I learn from that, and I implement it. So the reality is, like, if I can accelerate the speed at which you find that insight, wherever it may be, and apply it on your new wells, you've created value there. And so I think that was one of the original insights among others.
Sure. Well, perhaps can you describe your company's history with venture capital and some of the benefits and outcomes that you've seen following some of the funding round, particularly the one in 2017?
So I bootstrapped the company from day one, but ultimately ran out of money after a few years. I really wanted it to be I never had plans to actually go external for money. This industry has a very unique venture capital model, if you ask me. To be successful with VC, you need to get over quite a few large speed bumps. This isn't Silicon Valley where you kind of unpeel the layers of the onion. So your seed round is you're de-risking the team. Your A is you're de-risking product market fit. Your B is you're de-risking scale. I think that the way that they look at it is not really shared in this industry. And so, one thing to note is like if you're following those guys for guidance or how that works, I'm not sure it will be that successful in oil and gas. What I've seen is companies, venture capitalists are working in this industry are working more as like operating partners, and so it's
right.
It's just quite a different model. I think we've seen really great advancements in the last 3 years, but if you ask me, we're not seeing nowhere near enough of this. And it is hard because you go into operators or you go into oilfield service companies, and the joke is the oilfield service companies don't have money, and the operators require a 200-person organization to really fill their needs. So where does the startup kind of fit in that? I think that needs to be worked through, and I think we need to get better at that.
Sure, fair enough. Well, with so much data being produced in the oil field, and I know you talk about how one drilling rig generates a terabyte of data per month. How are you able to apply quality assurance and control to data to ensure that clients have the utmost faith in what they're using in making business decisions on?
That's a hard one. You truly can't appreciate data quality until you're in the trenches trying to fix it. As an example, if you accidentally automatically label data incorrectly, and this happens a lot, the first foot of drilling actually gives you an indicator that there was drilling, but then when you come back and look at it manually, you actually find out that there wasn't. But that timestamp, if it's off by a few hours, if it's off by, a day, it's going to screw up all of your automatically generated metrics. And so that's just a simple example of like that one thing has a cascading effect. And so at Corva, I feel like we've spent the last 4 years trying to figure out that workflow, and it's really hard. We have a whole software team dedicated to just data quality for our internal operations team. I mean, if that doesn't say like how hard and important it is, it's hard to even, give more across, but it's something that the industry, unless you have an appreciation for it, you really don't care about it. And I think what we could do is help build better awareness for why it's important or why you need it. But I think it's a really hard challenge. But the net upside is you do have better metrics, and if you're making your decisions on this data, you do need it to be right.
Of course. So a relatively recent quote by you stated that Corva's secret sauce is about the user experience. Could you elaborate on that?
So many companies in oil and gas operate like Google. And I don't think this is Corva. But the idea is that they build these really amazing algorithms that do some hard calculations. And if you're Google, the way that they've won is they have built a very simple interface. It's a search box. The problem is you can't offer a very complex solution with a complex user interface. It just doesn't work. So if you want to be Google and you have this amazing backend, you need a simple experience. If you ask me, Corva is a product company. We're the Apple, we're the iPhone. And so what we believe in is building amazing products that people love. And it's a very different model, I think, than what oil and gas is used to. But I really think it's something that we really desire. If you look at the field, these guys, they don't want to use software from 1990 or that looks like 1990. They don't want to spend all their time trying to figure out the knobs and the bells and the whistles. The reality is like, yes, they want to do the best job, but they want something that's really easy to use and intuitive.
Fair enough. That makes sense. So can we talk maybe about some of the tangible benefits from using your real-time drilling platform in terms of operational efficiency or drilling time, or however you'd like to describe it, and perhaps the same for completions as well?
Sure. So just at the end of last year, we actually presented to 2 customers. We didn't do a case study. We didn't like write about this, but just for those, we saved $50 million last year in the Permian. So the value of Corva is very real. We think that doesn't, we're not putting intangibles in that value. That's something that we're directly measuring. I think if you look at intangibles, the pie gets much bigger. But it all boils down to really just reducing well time, and we're doing that in many ways. The future is really about, there's many decisions that can be made in real time, and there's a lot of data that adds into that. So Corva on the drilling side has about 60 apps. If you say each 60 of those has some sort of unique indicator that factors into your decision, that's a lot to process to make any decision, even if you said half of that, so 30 indicators. What people really need is a way to kind of automatically make those decisions and make the best ones at that time. And so what we're trying to do is take that data, give it to people, and allow them to reduce time. What we're doing in drilling, we've applied pretty well to the completion sphere. It's a very different model. I think there's really a lot of different challenges, but the goal is the same, which is we think that reducing time for drilling or completions is the ultimate goal.
Right. Well, during the past 2 years, the company has made a number of incremental hires and investments in R&D, engineering, software development. You alluded to it earlier. You kind of hiring as fast as you can. What was the thinking behind that, and has this downturn that we're in right now impacted your strategy?
I've always been a big believer in tripling down on innovation. I think that there's so much to do with so little time. So we're not the company that's hiring 100 salespeople. We're actually the company with very few salespeople, mostly building what we believe to be very valuable products. I think that strategy is very real today, but I think what you're going to see from most companies, and people are already talking about it, in past downturns, a lot of technology has come out very successfully. What I think is happening is companies have to pick and choose what they're going to focus on. If they had 50 projects of innovation, they're going to boil that down to one. And it turns out when you get a company really focused on one goal, usually it becomes very successful. And so Corva is having a change too, like everyone else. And the idea is like, what are the things that we think are going to be most successful? As a CEO, my job is to figure out, really, we can continue to make base hits, but what are the things that we can do, what we can invest in that we think might have a 100x return versus a 2x return? And so that's kind of like the things that we're sort of organizing the company to pursue.
Not a bad pursuit. Well, a couple of parting questions for me here, Ryan. How will investors know that you're executing on your milestones? What are those key milestones for this year and next year, so that we know that the plan is on track?
From a high level, Corva's on about, within the United States and Canada, we're about on half of the rig, so about 50%. I think later into 2020 and 2021, I think you'll see that we're successful if we're getting up to 60-70% of that market. At the same time, we're really making an aggressive push into international. We have many super majors that are deploying us worldwide on all of their fleets. And I think what you'll see is us kind of showing up in rigs around the world. I think this is going to be ubiquitous technology. And I think what you're going to see is companies be able to share the tools So if you go from one platform in the middle of the ocean to a land asset within your same company, you'll be able to use the same tool set. And so we think that's a great value add.
No doubt. Well, lastly, what's something that, say, investors or market observers don't realize, maybe not only about Corva, but about the broader market that you operate in?
I think there's a lot of talk about data being very important. James, I know your thesis. I've listened and read a lot of your work. The word is definitely out there. The question is who's going to actuate on it.
Right.
And I think from an investor's perspective, that's really hard because we get back to these companies and what's their core DNA. And if investors are driving these companies to sort of pursue what is their DNA, or are they going to instead, encourage them to pursue the data world? And I think what we're going to see is some people are going to fail, and some people are going to really figure out, well, here's my core DNA. I can maybe adapt it a little bit to be over here that fits with this future data world. Or I can pair up with different startups and say that's my go-to-market strategy. But one thing we all realize, I think that you would agree with, is people are going to have to pick and make that strategy. Right now, there's a lot of movement toward it, but I would argue that it hasn't been all that successful. And so we're going to have a double down on people have to pick and choose, and the markets are going to be watching.
Right. No doubt about that. Well, look, Ryan, always great to catch up. Always good to hear your thoughts. I'm glad we got to get this out to our listeners as well. Thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to checking back in with you in the near future.
Thanks, James.
Okay, take care.